People who got kicked out of their homes. What happened? I was 14 the first time my father told me who I was going to marry. Not if, not when. Who. In my family, marriage wasn't about love. It was business. A way to lock property and favors inside the bloodline. Sons were promised to cousins. Daughters promised to men older than their own fathers. My cousin Anya was 13 when she was given to my uncle's business partner. She sat there in her frilly dress while they toasted with whiskey, clapping each other on the back like they'd signed a deal over land. At dinners, the adults spoke about it like it was a joke. Anya's set for life, my uncle laughed once, raising his glass. Ravi will take over the hardware store once he marries into it, my father said, patting my shoulder like I should be proud. Everyone laughed. Everyone except the kids. I learned early to keep my face blank, to swallow the disgust that burned in my throat, but it got harder when I found out about Mira. She was my little cousin, just 11, sweet, quiet, always drawing horses in the corner of her notebooks. One night I heard my father's voice through the wall. Low, steady. She'll be ready by 15. He agreed to wait. Until then I thought I misheard. But a week later, I found Mira crying in the hallway, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. Her wrists had finger-shaped bruises. Don't tell, she begged me. Her voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. If I say anything, they'll make it worse. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her at the dinner table, silent, while the men carved up her future like she wasn't even in the room. So I started writing. At first, just dates and names. Anya, 13, promised to Raj's partner. Ravi, 16, betrothed to second cousin. Mira, 11, ready at 15. Soon my cousins started whispering things to me, secrets they needed to get off their chests. He comes into my room at night. They said if I refuse, they'll send me away. I scribbled every word, every whisper, hiding the notebook under the loose floorboard in my closet. It became our secret currency. Notes passed inside textbooks, messages carved into the back of desks at school, a quiet record of everything the adults wanted buried. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew one day it would matter. It all came crashing down at Anya's wedding. She was only 15, dressed in a red sari 2 sizes too big, her hands shaking as the priest chanted blessings she didn't understand. I looked across the aisle and caught Mira's eyes. She mouthed 2 words, help me. Something inside me cracked open. When the vows began, I stood up. My knees were shaking, but my voice came out loud enough for the whole hall to hear. She doesn't want this. None of them do. These marriages are a lie. The room froze. The priest stopped mid-blessing. My father's face drained of color. My uncle slammed his hand on the table. Sit down, he barked, but I didn't. I pulled the notebook from under my jacket and held it high. You think nobody sees? I wrote it all down. Every deal, every name, every bruise. You've been selling your own children's lives and everybody here knows it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman fainted. My father lunged for me, but before he could grab my arm, something I never expected happened. 3 other cousins stood up, kids who hadn't said a word in years. He hits her, one shouted, pointing at her father. They locked me in the basement, another cried. The hall erupted into screams and shouts. The priest tried to calm the crowd, but the words drowned in the storm. And then, just as my father's hand closed around my wrist, I heard a different sound. It was the heavy scrape of chairs. The older women, my grandma and aunt, rising to their feet. For the first time in my life, they weren't silent. My aunt's voice cut through the noise. This has gone on long enough. It's time we put a stop to it. The hall fell into a stunned hush. All eyes locked on my grandmother and my aunt. I had never seen them stand like that, not in all my life. Grandma's back was straight, her silver hair catching the light. My aunt's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. This has gone on long enough, she said again. Her words seemed to shake the very air. My Uncle Dev barked, "Sit down, woman!" His face was red, spit flying from his mouth, but she didn't flinch. Instead, Grandma stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. You men think this tradition makes you strong, but it has only made us cowards. The room erupted again, men shouting, women gasping. But I noticed something. None of the older women sat down. One by one, they rose too. My mother. My cousins' mothers. Women who had never once spoken above a whisper in front of their husbands. They stood with their arms folded, their silence suddenly louder than the men's anger. My father looked around, panicked. He had always counted on the women to back him in silence, to cover the shame with lowered eyes. But now every pair of eyes was staring back at him. This is family business, Uncle Raj snarled. You shame us in front of outsiders. My aunt shook her head. The shame was yours the day you started trading children like property. The priest, sweating, tried to restart the vows, but no one listened. Then a new voice broke in. Small, shaking, but clear. It was Mira. They told me I'd be married at 15, she whispered. But he already touched me. The crowd gasped. My stomach twisted. Mira's father, my uncle, lunged toward her, but Grandma stepped in front of him. At nearly 70, she was barely 5 feet tall, but she stared him down like stone. You will not touch her, she said. For the first time in my life, the men hesitated, but hesitation turned to fury. My father grabbed my arm harder, his nails digging into my skin. You think you're clever? He hissed. You think you can turn them against us? When this is over, you'll regret ever opening your mouth. Only, this time he wasn't the one holding all the power. Because suddenly, the women weren't just standing. They were speaking. One cried out, I was 13 when you forced me to marry your cousin. Another, I lost 2 babies because he was too old, too rough, and no one cared. Another still, we've been silent long enough. Not anymore. The men roared back, threatening, shouting, fists slamming on tables. But the room had changed. The weight of silence had snapped. And as my father dragged me toward the door, I saw something in my grandmother's eyes. Something fierce, almost dangerous. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. The old order was cracking, and when old walls crack, they don't fall quietly. The men were yelling so loud the air shook, but the women didn't sit back down. For the first time in my life, they stayed standing. My grandmother's hand was shaking as she held her cane, but her voice was steady. You used us like property. You used the children too. It ends now. My Uncle Dev's face went red. He slammed his fist on the table. Shut your mouth, old woman, he shouted. But she didn't. One by one, more women spoke. Another aunt raised her hand, pointing at her husband. I lost 2 babies because of you, and you never cared. Another, we carried the shame so you could walk tall. No more, the men tried to shout over them. They screamed about honor, family, tradition. They pointed fingers, threatened, cursed, but the women didn't stop. Their voices, small and shaking, piled one on top of the other until it became a storm. I saw the younger girls staring, their mouths open. They had never seen their mothers speak like this. None of us had. My father finally grabbed my arm again. His nails dug into my skin as he leaned close. His breath was hot in my ear. You think this changes anything? He whispered. When these people leave, you'll pay for this. Every single one of you. But for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of him. Because behind me, my grandmother raised her chin and said, if you touch her again, I'll kill you myself. The room went quiet. Completely quiet. Even the men looked stunned. My grandmother had been silent for decades, serving food, bowing her head, doing everything asked of her, and now she was threatening them in front of everyone. My Uncle Raj finally broke the silence. He stood pointing at her with a shaking hand. You're tearing this family apart, he said. Everything we built, everything our fathers built, you spit on it. Grandma's voice was calm. Your fathers built cages. And you kept us inside them. That was not family. That was slavery. The words hit the room like a stone through glass. The older men looked around, but for the first time, nobody clapped for them. Nobody backed them up. Even some of the younger boys lowered their eyes, and then it happened. The groom's family stood up. They looked disgusted, whispering to each other. Finally, the groom's father said, We will not be part of this filth. He grabbed his son by the arm and pulled him toward the door. Anya, still in her red sari, collapsed into a chair, sobbing. My Uncle Dev screamed after them, begging them not to leave, promising it wasn't true. But nobody listened. The deal was broken. The marriage was ruined. The business tie my father and uncles had been planning for years had just crumbled in front of everyone. And then the whispers began. Not from the family, but from the neighbors. Because the hall wasn't just filled with us. There were outsiders there too. People from the town. Family friends. They had seen everything, heard everything. One woman said, they were marrying her at 15? Another man shook his head. This is a crime. They'll all be in prison for this. The men panicked. My father shouted for silence. My uncles tried to laugh it off, saying the women were just emotional. But it was too late. The secret was gone. For the first time, the family wasn't just fighting itself. The whole world was watching. The men shouted louder, desperate to drown out the whispers. But the doors of the hall swung open. 2 police officers stepped inside, followed by a woman holding a clipboard and wearing a badge around her neck. She spoke first. Child Protective Services. We got a call about a minor being forced into marriage. Everyone stay where you are. The room froze. My father's grip on my arm loosened. My uncles looked like the ground had been pulled out from under them. The CPS worker's eyes went straight to Anya. She was still crying in her chair, the red sari slipping off her thin shoulders. The woman knelt in front of her and said softly, Sweetheart, how old are you? 15, Anya whispered. Gasps rippled again. The officer wrote something down. Another stepped forward. And where are her parents? Uncle Dev tried to speak, but my grandmother cut him off. She raised her hand, pointing straight at him. There, she said. The men sitting at that table. They planned it. They planned all of it. The CPS worker turned. Is this true? The men stammered, tripping over their words. It's our culture, our tradition. She was ready. This is a misunderstanding. But the women didn't let them finish. My aunt stepped forward. No, she said. It's not culture. It's abuse, and it has gone on for generations. The officers looked at each other. One of them muttered, We'll need statements. Then Mira stood up. Her hands were shaking, but she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. They told me I'd be married at 15 too, she said. But he already touched me. She pointed at her father. The room erupted. Half the neighbors gasped, some shouted, some cursed under their breath. The CPS worker didn't hesitate. She walked straight to Mira and pulled her gently to her side. You're safe now, she told her. He won't touch you again. My uncle lunged up from his chair, but the police blocked him. One officer pressed a hand to his chest. Sit down, sir. My grandmother wasn't done. Her voice cut like a knife. You want statements? She said. You'll have them. Every girl here, every woman here has one. Write them down. And for the first time in my life, the women didn't hide. They didn't whisper. They spoke. One by one, they told the officers what had been done to them. The marriages, the bruises, the nights they couldn't speak of. The men sat in silence, their faces pale, their power slipping through their fingers. The CPS worker glanced at the officers and nodded. We'll need protective custody for some of the children tonight. And we'll be opening an investigation the neighbors didn't leave. They stayed, watching, murmuring. Some women from the town even came to stand near my grandmother like they were shielding her. I looked at her, at my aunt, at the cousins who had once been too afraid to speak. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were fighting. When the officers finally said, "We'll need to take the children home, separate from the men," my grandmother stood tall. "They're coming with me," she said, every last one of them, and none of the men could stop her. CPS officers escorted us to Grandma's home, a small, crumbling place at the edge of town. There weren't enough beds, so cousins spread out on the floor, curled up in blankets that smelled of mothballs and lavender soap. For the first time in years, we slept without the sound of locks clicking behind us, but peace didn't last. 2 days later, the first letter came. No stamp. Just folded paper shoved under Grandma's door. "You've brought shame on us all. Come back quietly, or it will get worse." By the end of the week, there were 3 more. One threatened to cut off money, another swore we'd pay for what we said. One had no words at all, just a dead bird wrapped in cloth. The younger girls cried. My aunt wanted to burn the letters, pretend they didn't exist. But Grandma placed them in a shoebox and said, "We keep every threat. We keep every proof." The investigation was already moving. CPS visited almost daily, asking questions, checking on the children. The police had interviewed most of the women, but the men weren't quiet either. They called family friends, begged neighbors to vouch for them, painted us as liars. At church, Uncle Raj told everyone, "The women have been poisoned." They don't know what they're saying, but the biggest change came when Grandma's old friend, Lada, showed up. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes, the kind that never looked away. With her was her daughter, Amira, a young lawyer from the city. She was only 26, but she carried herself like she'd spent her whole life in courtrooms. Amira spread the letters on the table and tapped her pen against them. "These are threats," she said. "That helps us. They're digging their own graves." Grandma nodded. "We'll fight them." The word fight felt strange in her mouth. For years, fight wasn't something women in our family were allowed to do, but now it was the only thing left. Of course, the men didn't stay quiet. One night, a rock smashed through Grandma's kitchen window. A note tied to it read, "Enough games. Give the children back." The police were called, but by the time they arrived, no one was outside. The neighbors had heard the glass break, though. They peeked out from porches and windows, shaking their heads, muttering to each other. "They're desperate," Amira said, "and desperate men make mistakes." But not all mistakes came from them. The stress was breaking us too. One cousin, Ronnie, only 13, screamed at night from nightmares. Another, little Kavya, stopped eating, afraid every bite was poisoned. Even Mira sat silent for hours, clutching her sketchbook but never drawing. We were falling apart, and that's when Grandma gathered us all in the living room. She stood with her cane, looking more like a general than a grandmother. "They think we're weak," she said. "They think we'll crawl back. But we are going to show them something they have never seen. We are going to win." And for the first time, I almost believed her. The very next morning, Amira brought news. The men had hired their own lawyer, a ruthless one known for twisting stories. He was already telling people this was a plot to steal property, that Grandma had filled our heads with lies to take the family land. It was going to be a war. Amira wasn't exaggerating. Within days, the men's lawyer had plastered their story everywhere he could. Tea shops, the church steps, even the little grocery store where everyone bought rice and lentils. Strangers started whispering when we walked by. "Greedy women," one old man muttered loud enough for us to hear. "They'll ruin the family name," said another. It stung, but Amira told us to write everything down. Every insult, every rumor, every scare tactic, she said. The truth hides in details. Courts care about details. At Grandma's house, life was cramped but strangely alive. We ate together at one long table. Rice, dal, sometimes only flatbread and pickles when money ran low. The younger girls would fight over the last roti, and Grandma would swat their hands away with her cane, pretending to scold, but secretly smiling. At night, the older cousins whispered under blankets, sharing fears they had never dared to speak before. Still, the fear never left. The letters kept coming. This time slid under car windshields tucked into the cracks of our fence. One said, "Children don't belong in court." "Keep quiet," another warned. "Next time, it won't be a rock." Amira kept every single one, filing them neatly into plastic sleeves. She worked late at night at Grandma's kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, a cup of strong tea at her elbow. Sometimes she'd fall asleep with her cheek pressed against the files. The stress showed on all of us. Ronnie's nightmares got worse. She'd wake up screaming, convinced someone was in the room. Mira, who had stopped drawing, started scratching dark, angry shapes on paper, jagged lines, black circles. Even Grandma had nights when I'd find her awake, sitting silently by the window with her cane across her lap, as though she was guarding us. Then came the first real twist. One evening, just as we were clearing plates after dinner, the doorbell rang. Grandma stiffened. We all froze. But when she opened the door, it wasn't another threat. It was Neela, my father's younger sister, the quietest of them all. She looked different. No makeup, no jewelry. Her scarf pulled low over her face. She stepped inside, clutching a small bundle of clothes. "They're watching me," she whispered. "But I can't stay with them anymore." "I want to help." The room went silent. My aunt nearly dropped a plate. Neela had always been loyal to the men, always the first to scold us when we disobeyed. And now she was here, shaking, asking to stay. Amira didn't waste time. "Why now?" she asked. Neela swallowed hard. "Because they're planning something. They said if the case goes to court, they'll send the children away, overseas, to relatives. where no one can touch them. The words hit us like a slap. Even Grandma, who never showed fear, gripped her cane tighter. That's trafficking, Amira said flatly. If they try it, they'll face more than child marriage charges. But that didn't comfort us. Because if the men were desperate enough to smash windows and send threats, what else were they desperate enough to do? Grandma pulled Neela close, kissed her forehead, and said only one thing. Then we fight harder. And that's exactly what we did. The next morning, Amira arranged a meeting with a district investigator. For the first time, it wouldn't just be CPS or local police, it was going higher. And higher meant more danger for us. And less control for the men. The district office was colder than I expected. Not just the air but the walls, painted in dull gray with long fluorescent lights buzzing above us. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old files. We sat in a row of plastic chairs. Me, Grandma, Amira, my aunt, and Neela. The younger girls had been left at home with a social worker, but I still felt like I carried their voices in my chest. The investigator came out after 15 minutes. His name was Mr. Sharma, a tall man with sharp glasses and a notebook tucked under his arm. He looked like the type of person who had seen too many cases and trusted too few stories. Come in, he said. His voice was calm, but it didn't feel warm. We filed into a small office, a fan turned lazily overhead, stirring the stack of files on his desk. Amira introduced us, her words quick, professional. Grandma sat stiff in her chair, her cane resting across her lap like a shield. Mr. Sharma opened his notebook. I've read the reports from CPS and the local police, but before this goes further, I need to hear it from you. No interruptions, no exaggerations, just the truth. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Grandma leaned forward. Her voice was slow, steady. My granddaughter was 15 when they tried to force her into marriage. She was not the first. She would not have been the last. It has gone on for decades, Mr. Sharma tapped his pen. Who planned these marriages? She didn't look away. The men. My sons. My brothers. Their friends. They called it tradition. I call it crime. I felt the air tighten in the room. Even saying it out loud to someone in power was dangerous. But once Grandma started, she didn't stop. She told him everything. Names, ages, places. Amira slid the plastic sleeves of letters across the desk one by one, each one marked, dated, handled carefully. Then it was my turn. My palms were damp as I told him about the notebook I had kept, the whispers from my cousins, the bruises on Mira's wrist. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. Mr. Sharma wrote quickly, his pen scratching across the paper. Sometimes he looked up, his brow furrowed, as if measuring the weight of our words. After more than an hour, he closed the notebook. He looked tired, but something had shifted in his face. You understand, he said slowly, that this will not be easy. These men will fight. They will claim it is culture. They will try to silence you. Grandma didn't blink. Let them try. Amira leaned forward. We need protection for the children. They've already made threats. They talked about sending them overseas. That got his attention. He sat straighter. Overseas? Neela finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I heard them. They said if the case went forward, they would send the girls to Dubai, to cousins. I know what that means. The room went very quiet. Mr. Sharma put his pen down. That is not just child marriage. That is trafficking. We all knew it, but hearing him say it out loud made the hair rise on my arms. He stood, walked to the file cabinet, and pulled out a red folder. I'll escalate this to the Special Crimes Unit. Until the hearing, you'll remain under watch. We'll assign officers to patrol near the house. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Protection meant safety, but it also meant danger was closer than ever. When we got back to Grandma's house that night, the street was already different. A police car idled at the corner, its blue lights off, but its presence heavy. 2 officers stepped out and spoke with Amira, then walked the perimeter of the property, checking the fences, the locks. For the first time in weeks, nobody slid a letter under our door. No rocks, no dead birds, just silence. The next morning, CPS came by again. A woman with tired eyes and a thick folder sat at the kitchen table, asking questions, filling out forms. When she left, Amira gathered us all in the living room. The court date is set, she said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the weight in it. 1 week from today. The words hit like a drum. 1 week. 7 days until we'd have to stand in front of judges, lawyers, and the very men we had accused. Those 7 days blurred together. Amira barely slept. She lived at Grandma's kitchen table, her laptop open, papers spread everywhere. We'd hear the clack of her keyboard deep into the night, see her hunched over files when the sun came up. Every so often she'd call out, "Who remembers this date? What year was this marriage? Do you still have that drawing?" And one of us would run to fetch whatever she needed. Grandma was no less busy. She dug through old trunks, pulling out birth certificates, wedding photos, even faded receipts from dowry payments long forgotten. They kept records to boast, she muttered once, holding up a yellowed ledger. Now those same records will bury them. The house was crowded, tense, but without threats pressing on us, it felt almost bearable. The younger girls played cards in the evenings, their laughter sharp and quick, as if they were trying to chase away the fear. Ronnie still woke from nightmares, but she wasn't alone anymore. There was always a cousin or an aunt to sit beside her until she calmed down. And then the 7th day came. We rose before dawn, dressed in our plainest clothes. No jewelry, no bright colors. Amira said, "Let them see the truth." Not costumes, not traditions. Just us. The courthouse was massive, white stone columns rising against the morning sky. As we walked up the steps, I felt my legs go weak. Cameras flashed. Reporters were already there. Voices shouted questions. Is it true the family arranged child marriages? Are the girls safe? Officers kept the crowd back, but the noise pressed in on us like a wave. Inside, the air was thick with polish and paper. Wooden benches lined the back, already filling with neighbors, family friends, even strangers who had heard the whispers. The men were there too, my father, my uncles, and dressed in their best suits, their lawyer standing tall beside them. Their faces were calm, but I saw the anger in their eyes. We sat on the other side, crowded together. Grandma in the middle, her cane resting across her knees like a warning. Amira opened her briefcase, pulled out the first stack of papers, and whispered to us, "This is it. We tell the truth. All of it. Don't hold back." The judge entered. Everyone stood. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The trial hadn't even begun, but already the air felt like it could split in two. The judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and called the case to order. His voice echoed through the chamber. "This court will hear the matter of state versus..." He listed the names of my father and uncles, one by one, each syllable landing like a stone. The men's lawyer, a tall man in a dark blue suit, rose first. His voice was smooth, almost too smooth. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of crime, but of cultural misunderstanding. These families have practiced arranged marriages for generations. It is tradition. The prosecution is twisting customs into criminal acts." I felt Grandma stiffen beside me. Amira stood, calm but fierce. "With respect, Your Honor, what the defense calls tradition is, by law, exploitation. The victims were underage. Consent was never given. This is not culture. This is child marriage. And it is illegal." The defense lawyer gave a small smile, as if he had expected that. He flipped open a folder. "We have witnesses who will testify that the girls were never forced. That they agreed. That these so-called threats are nothing more than family disagreements, exaggerated for attention." "Agreed," Amira's voice cut through the room. "Can a 15-year-old truly agree to marry a man twice her age? Can a child consent when her guardians control every aspect of her life? The law is clear. Under 18, there is no consent." "None." The judge nodded slightly, scribbling notes. Then came the evidence. Amira laid out the letters first, each one in its plastic sleeve, each one dated, photographed, and logged. "These were delivered to the family's home over the course of 3 months," she said. "Threats of violence. Threats of disappearance. This is not family disagreement. This is intimidation." The defense lawyer leaned forward, waving a hand dismissively. "Anonymous notes. No proof of who wrote them. Could be anyone. Neighbors. Strangers. Even fabricated by the plaintiffs to gain sympathy." That's when Amira brought up Neela. My aunt rose slowly, her hands trembling as she took the stand. For the first time, she looked directly at the men. "I lived in that house. I heard them. I saw the plans. They were arranging visas, talking about Dubai, about sending the children away before the police could act." The courtroom shifted. Even the judge leaned forward. The defense lawyer pounced. "And only now, you decide to speak? After years of silence? Isn't it convenient, madam, that you come forward only when your own position in the family is threatened?" Neela's lips trembled, but her voice held. "I was afraid. We were all afraid. But fear doesn't erase the truth," Amira stood again, firm. "Your Honor, this witness has no reason to invent such claims, and her testimony aligns with other evidence. The passports found half prepared, the receipts for international transfers. These are not coincidences. These are preparations for trafficking." The judge raised his hand. "Enough. This court recognizes the seriousness of the claims. The evidence will be reviewed in full." His voice was steady, but the weight of it filled the room. The day stretched on like that. Argument, counter-argument, evidence stacked against denial. At times, the defense leaned heavily on tradition and misunderstanding. Amira answered with law, with facts, with the voices of children who had been silenced for too long. By the time the judge finally struck the gavel, announcing that sentencing would be delivered the following week, I felt drained. My throat was dry, my head heavy, but deep inside, a spark flickered. For once, the truth had been spoken out loud, where the whole world could hear it. The week before sentencing was the longest of my life. The police cars still patrolled the street, but now the danger felt different. It wasn't rocks or letters anymore, it was silence. The men had gone quiet, and that silence was heavier than any threat. Grandma tried to keep the house steady. Every morning she cooked a big pot of dal, forcing us to eat, saying, "We must keep our strength." But at night, I sometimes found her praying in whispers, her cane leaning against the chair, her hands shaking. Amira never stopped working. Even after the trial day, she kept combing through files, preparing for any last trick the defense might pull. "They'll push for reduced charges," she warned Grandma. "They'll say it was cultural, that no harm was done. We need to be ready." And then the day came. The courtroom was packed, even fuller than before. Journalists, neighbors, people who had once looked away, now came to see what would happen. The men sat stiff in their suits, eyes fixed forward as if they could stare through the walls. We sat opposite them. Grandma in the middle, her back straight, her cane laid across her lap. I had never seen her look so unyielding. The judge entered, papers in hand. The room hushed until you could almost hear the walls breathing. He began slowly, reviewing the evidence, the letters, the testimonies, the financial records. Each detail landed heavy, like weights being dropped onto a scale. The defense lawyer tried one last time. He stood and said, "Your Honor, these are respected men. Fathers, brothers, community leaders. Their intentions were never criminal. They acted according to culture, not malice." Amira rose immediately. Her voice was sharp, clear. "With respect, Your Honor, the law does not bend for culture. It protects the innocent. And these men did not act out of ignorance. They acted with intent. They hid records, sent threats, planned to ship children overseas. That is not tradition. That is crime." The judge let the words hang in the air before he spoke again. "This court has considered both arguments. And this court finds..." The pause was endless. My hands twisted together, my throat dry. I could feel my cousin Ronnie trembling next to me. Guilty. The word hit like thunder. Guilty on multiple counts: child marriage, coercion, conspiracy, and attempted trafficking. Gasps rippled through the benches. Some neighbors muttered. Others sat stone silent. Across the room, my father's jaw tightened, but he didn't look at us. None of the men did. The judge continued. "Sentencing will follow immediately. These are grave crimes. This court cannot and will not excuse them under the guise of culture." The judge's voice didn't shake when he read the sentences. For Rajesh Patel, guilty of conspiracy, coercion, and attempted trafficking. 15 years in federal prison. My uncle slumped in his chair, his lawyer whispering furiously into his ear, but Rajesh only stared at the floor. For Dev Patel, guilty of child marriage, coercion, and attempted trafficking. 14 years, Dev's wife gasped from the backbench, but no one comforted her. For Mahesh Patel, guilty of child marriage, coercion, and intimidation. 12 years Mahesh tried to stand, but the bailiff's hand pressed him down. And for Rakesh Patel, my father's name, guilty of child marriage, coercion, and trafficking conspiracy. 16 years. The words punched the air out of me. My father didn't even look at me. He clenched his jaw, his knuckles white against the table. For years I had wondered if he ever felt guilt or shame or even love, but that day he showed nothing. The gavel struck. "The defendants are remanded to custody immediately." Officers stepped forward. One by one, the men were led away in handcuffs. Their shoes echoed against the floor as they disappeared through the side door. Just like that, their power was gone. Grandma sat tall, her hands resting on her cane. She whispered only one word. "Finished." The court granted custody of all the children to her. CPS would monitor the home, visit monthly, and provide support. But it was Grandma who walked out of that courthouse with her head high, flanked by every grandchild and niece who had once been silenced. That was 3 years ago. I'm 19 now. I just started college and the first in my family to ever go. The campus feels huge, full of voices and faces that don't know my story, don't know where I came from. Sometimes that feels like freedom. Sometimes it feels like a weight. Grandma isn't here to see it. She passed away 2 months ago, her heart finally giving out in her sleep. We buried her with her cane resting at her side, the same cane she once carried like a weapon. At the funeral, the women of the neighborhood stood shoulder to shoulder around her grave, heads held high. They called her a warrior. They weren't wrong. After the trial, Grandma raised us all. The house was crowded, loud, chaotic. Cousins sprawled on the floor, aunts cooking 2 pots of rice at once, kids fighting over who got the last blanket. But it was safe. And safe was something we had never truly known. CPS came often in those first years, checking the living conditions. Sometimes they asked too many questions, but every time they left with the same note: stable environment, children thriving. My Aunt Mira, who had once sat silent with her sketchbook, lives with us still. She's older now, steadier. She helps with the younger cousins, takes them to school, makes sure no one falls through the cracks. As for Amira, she never stopped fighting. After our case, she became known across the district for taking on the cases no one else wanted. Girls forced into silence, women trapped by tradition, families who thought they had no power. She visits us sometimes, still carrying her laptop and a cup of strong tea, still sharp as ever. Every time she walks through the door, the younger cousins whisper, "That's the lawyer who saved us." And they're right. She didn't just win a case, she gave us a future. Sometimes at night, I still hear echoes of the old days. The slam of a door, the sound of voices raised in anger. But then I remember where I am. I remember the trial, the gavel, the word guilty. And I remember Grandma's last words to me, whispered a week before she passed. "Don't let them take your life. You make it so I am." 3 years later, we're still here, we're still standing, and we're finally free. If you liked the story, make sure you like the video and subscribe. Click on the video on the screen to continue watching.